The Dolphins, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen. We're in the air.
You know, I don't know if the Dolphins are the number one football team. Can we still play that song?
We might as well throw that out, and apparently we have to throw out fins up too. Did you see that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
So, everyone, welcome to FL Teams. Again, FLTeams.com is your go-to one-stop shop for all Florida sports coverage. I'm Isaac Edelman, here with my good buddy Jeremiah Hensley. Two big Dolphin fans, maybe not as big now, but that's why we're here to talk about the Dolphin season, but really where to go from here, because all of you guys watching know what happened. The Dolphins are no longer in the playoffs. They lost to the Chiefs, blah, 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 disappointment, blah, blah, blah. We know that. What we need to know is what's going to happen in the future. Tua, McDaniel, things like that, and that's why we're here. Jeremiah, how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing good, buddy. I'm doing good. I'm glad we took a little breather before we did this show because I needed some time to process, But yeah, right back on it, man. There's great football to be played. I'm getting used to watching playoff football without Miami, so,
Yeah, and no, with that said, that's a perfect transition. The Dolphins currently have the longest drought without a playoff win. The Lions obviously got their win. And look, that's disappointing because the Dolphins are not a historically bad franchise. Between Dan Marino, the perfect season, even this season, the Dolphins appeared good. The Dolphins are not a bad team. They just don't know how to win in the playoffs. And it was proven yet again, even with star players like Tyreek Hill, who led the NFL in receiving yards, Raheem Mostert, who led the NFL in rushing touchdowns, and Tua, we'll talk about him, but on paper, he led the NFL in passing yards. So before we talk about the future of this team, Jeremiah, talk about the expectations you had for this team. And I don't need to ask you if they came up short, because obviously they did, but just what were your true thoughts after they lost to the Chiefs?
It was all too familiar. I mean, I could tell in the third quarter I felt it, right?
Yeah.
But this was a weird year because, as you've seen, I tried to temper my expectations. They came out of the gate looking great. I tried not to buy in. They lost a couple to the good teams, so it brought me back down. But then there was that victory that came back up. So it was really a roller coaster all the way through it. I had to stop after the Chiefs game and really, it's going to sound like excuses. I don't live in that world, and it's a big next man up. But when you look at this, we're in KC, frigid weather, with over half of the starting defense on IR or not playing. You were without Chubb. You were without Phillips. You were without Holland. You were without Xavier Howard. You were without Jerome Baker, Van Ginkel, all those guys out. And we're still in a position to make it a one-score game until Christian Wilkins gets a nonsense, roughing the passer. And, more disappointed that the offense stopped producing near the end. And that was a big problem. But I think ultimately you want to see growth. Yeah. All of us, 23 years of no wins, we want to see growth quicker. But I think ultimately this year was another building block. It was another step in the right direction.
Yeah, and not just that, you spoke about the expectations, and you also spoke about, the frigid weather. It was hot at the beginning of the season. They beat the Broncos by a ton. That's probably their best win of the season. And then they have the worst game of the season against the Titans. But what did you just say a few minutes ago? You're familiar with this. The Dolphins always have that amazing game, right? Like last year they had that Ravens-Dolphins game that you were at.
Yep.
And then they just fall apart at the end. This year, you beat the Broncos. I know they weren't that good at the time. But then that Titans loss, you're up by 2 scores. And not just that, that was when the Dolphins were kind of at their peak, right? They were very good. The beginning of the season, you don't really know how good these teams are. But when the Dolphins played the Titans, they were that powerhouse. And boom, they just fall apart. I just don't know what to say because you had Mike McDaniel, a pretty good coach. You had Tyreek Hill, Tua, Raheem Mostert, and that's just the offensive pieces, right? Jalen Ramsey, Christian Wilkins, Sealer, Xavier Howard, all of these players, and yet they fall well short of expectations. What do you think was the big thing that went wrong for the Dolphins?
I think the offense became one-dimensional. I really felt like, I know we had some injuries, but Jalen Waddle wasn't nearly as involved as I thought he would be all season. And I can't think that that's because he wasn't open, right? It was a lot of force the ball to Tyreek. I do still think that Tua is a problem in progressions. If everything's not going exactly right, if you throw him off his timing or get him behind the sticks, it's completely different. And defensively, I had higher hopes for Fangio, but the defense never really fielded that healthy team all year. The Titans game was really, to me, indicative of what good teams do and bad teams do. We had no reason to be up in that game at all.
Exactly.
The Titans were crushing the Dolphins the entire game and then tried to give it away, and they didn't take it. Right. I mean, that's one, and that game ends up being the difference between a home playoff game or going on the road, winning the division or not. And, that to me at first it ate me up, but then I'm trying to look at it as that's still growing pains. This is literally Mike McDaniel's second year as a head coach. Tua's first full year healthy. But, I think a lot of things went wrong. The killer instinct, and I think our friend Jeff said it over and over to us in chats, is this team just wasn't, they were soft. They were soft.
Yeah.
And you can't win in the NFL being soft.
Yeah. And I want to touch on Tua, right? I know this is where the heat of the show is going to be. So I'll first say this. I gave him a lot of chances, and I gave the fans chances, because when I publicly said that Tua is not a good quarterback, I got a lot of heat. And as I started to continue to say it, Tua didn't necessarily prove me wrong, but the fans kept on shushing me. And I said, okay, there has to be a reason why I'm being shushed. So I kind of settled down, right? You could
did.
I calmed down about Tua, but then I said, okay, I've had enough. I need to trust my gut. Stop listening to the outside, because now that everyone after this season is saying that Tua may not be that good, I'm finally going to say it again when I could have been saying it for the past season. Here's where I stand. And we said this in our private chat, right? And I'll let you add to this, because you brought up a very good point about his first reads. Tua is not a Mahomes. He doesn't need to be. He shouldn't have to be a Mahomes. But if you were watching that Chiefs-Dolphins game, the game audio was very good. Mike Tirico said that's because of the cold weather. I'm not a scientist. I have no idea how that's possible. But anyway, you heard Mahomes' audibles, and then his helmet broke, and they were able to figure all of that stuff out. Tua just is not that guy. He's just not that guy. There's no explaining. Tua cannot lead a team. I'm not saying he's a Jimmy Garoppolo that rides with the team's success, because Tua can throw the ball. But Tua is just not that leader. There are better options. I really think that Kirk Cousins and Geno Smith are better options. A lot of people agree with me, but there's a ton of people that disagree with me. Kirk Cousins gets a lot of hate, whether he deserves it or doesn't. There's just no way Tua is a better manager than him. Okay, maybe Tua is a better passer, but I think managing an offense, specifically on the Dolphins, is most important, because the Dolphins have the weapons. So managers turn into Pro Bowl quarterbacks. Not that means anything, the Pro Bowl these days, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks that are managers turn into superstars with guys like Tyreek Hill and Raheem Mostert and Mike McDaniel. And yet, Tua could not win a playoff game with these weapons. So I'll let you break down your thoughts on Tua, but I do want you to first bring up your point on the first read and why you think Tua might have such a good completion percentage. And maybe he doesn't even need to manage games, because he just takes that first read.
Yeah, I mean, look, they were playing mismatches, and I think here's the thing that I noticed more that I watched the season. Last year, the Miami Dolphins offense was very heavy in RPO, right? RPO requires your quarterback to make good decisions quickly, right? Whether he's going to run, he's going to pass, he's going to check out. That didn't go so well. If you notice this year, they took away those RPO options, and McDaniel went into motion and creating mismatches. Tua, I think, is just locked. And when he has that first read, you're playing with a double-edged sword, because sometimes what Tua does, which makes him look like the most accurate quarterback and the best quarterback that you've seen throw balls, is he throws to spots. He throws to spots. If you knock a guy off, right, and that spot is missed, everybody was on Chase Claypool about that interception at the end of the Bills game. But I mean, Claypool didn't run a great route, but I mean, it wasn't that bad. Tua just threw to a spot. And I think that's a problem. He doesn't, when he brings it down or has to tuck, he's not accurate.
Yeah.
He doesn't go through the reads. I've said multiple times, I really thought that he was going to get Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill killed. They ran those ends and did them well because they're speedy guys, but he was hanging them out to dry, throwing it high constantly.
Again,
I mean, them skying up in the air and coming back down. I mean, Waddle took some just massive hits.
Yeah.
And so I think Tua, one was the offensive line maybe wasn't as good as we thought it was. And as the season kept going on, you had to get rid of the ball quickly. His decision-making worries me. And as you said with Mahomes, one of the things I said earlier is Tua's young. You can't make that excuse when you saw two guys this weekend who got that dog in them, CJ Stroud and Jordan Love. They made plays.
And when you have the weapons that the Dolphins do, and again, this is not even Tua's rookie season, you just need to have that level of grit, that dog in you, and that Mahomes style. I don't need to compare him to Mahomes, but again, if that first read isn't available, Tua is stressed. Tua doesn't know what to do. And that's why I think that I'd rather take a Geno Smith and Kirk Cousins that are definitely not as young as Tua, but know how to lead on offense. Because leaders, especially with Tyreek Hill on your team, will be good quarterbacks. And look, the Dolphins don't need a mobile quarterback. It would have been nice if Tua could run the ball, but that's just how it is. So with this said, the future of this team. I personally think that Tua will be re-signed. Chris Greer had his press conference, unless he's lying, which GMs sometimes do that. It looks like he's going to be re-signed. They're talking to him already, and the season just ended. Well, they want to get on him first. But just because he's going to get re-signed doesn't mean that's the best decision. Me, personally, that's not a good decision at all. Even if it's not a Kirk Cousins or Geno Smith, the Dolphins need to move on from Tua. You're still going to have Tyreek Hill. You're still going to have Mostert. You're still going to have A-Chain. You have Mike McDaniel still. You're not going to fire him. You're not even going to think about that.
No.
You need a new quarterback. That's all I need to say. What about you, Jeremiah?
I don't think we need a new quarterback, right? I'd like it better if the Dolphins rode out this fifth year. You don't have to extend Tua this year. I mean, they already picked up the option, right? I mean, he's not a free agent. I mean, you can ride this thing out. But the mistake that I saw the previous regime and the Dolphins ownership make over and over with Ryan Tannehill is they refused to challenge Tannehill. Right. They had opportunities to draft quarterbacks who could have come in to push Tannehill, and they never did that. I think Tua can still be that guy. There's been progression and you see him improving. I think you need to challenge him. I think you need to draft a quarterback in the second, third round, somewhere in there that has the opportunity, the potential to push him. A guy like Sam Hartman coming out of Notre Dame. That played at Wake Forest before. Somebody who is in that Brock Purdy type mold that was successful in college, but maybe doesn't go off the charts in the draft. Ultimately, you grow with Tua. And I think part of that is because of his bond with McDaniel. Part of it is because McDaniel did kind of create an offense for Tua's strengths. Right. Which is the releasing and getting out quick and those things. Yeah. So you've kind of got this core together that's built on that. I think they're going to extend him. I don't feel great committing big money to him for the next 4 to 5 years. I'd prefer to see them ride out the fifth year. And then, like I say, draft somebody to challenge him and really see if he steps up or he doesn't, because ultimately, I don't know how good it makes me feel that McDaniel says the reason Tua got so much better was because he came in and he believed in it, right? And we know Flores gave him hell and didn't really. But again, you're a professional athlete. Where's that? I'm going to show you, right? Where's that? You don't think I can? Let me show you I can.
Exactly.
And if doubters make you curl up in a ball, you're not the dude who wants the ball in his hands in the fourth quarter.
Exactly.
So
I really like your point about getting someone to push Tua because, again, I don't really want Tua back. But if Tua comes back, it would have to be because he's going to improve. And I just don't see him improving. He already has weapons. He can't possibly have more weapons. Waddle, Hill, Mostert. You can't.
No.
And so how is he going to improve? I guess you're right. I mean, if he can have competition and someone pushes him to become better, that works. But it's hard to teach instinct, right?
Yeah.
And Tua just doesn't have that instinct. But in a way, if he gets that competition, he will improve. But that brings, then another dilemma where what if the Dolphins draft a quarterback and he's terrible and then Tua's not pushed? Again, the thing here, and I'm young, so I have plenty of years, but the guys like you with that playoff drought, you just want to win. And it's not like the window's shutting, but you don't want to waste a year.
Right.
And if no one pushes Tua and Tua's just like this year, you wasted a year. You want to see growth. And I know you talked about growing pains, but you need to see growth.
Yeah. And I mean, look, if in a perfect little bubble world, bringing in Kirk Cousins for 2 years or Geno Smith for a year may make this team better. But if you make a move like that, you are solidly saying Tua's completely done in Miami. And part of what we got to get to, and I was just on X or Twitter or whatever with just a bunch of Dolphin fans going back and forth. And everybody points to, well, against teams above 500, Tua's this, Tua's that, Tua's that. Here's the thing, man. I think a lot of people, when the Dolphins do well, the first thing that you hear, well, look at all the talent he has around him. And then when the Dolphins do poorly, Tua couldn't do it. So it's like, how does he shoulder all the blame in the loss, but get no credit in the wins? At the end of the day, the guy led the NFL, and the Pro Bowl doesn't mean what it used to, but he's a Pro Bowl quarterback. When's the last Pro Bowl quarterback that the Dolphins have had? We want more. We demand more. But I just don't think you can pull the plug on him completely because there's not a clear and definitive upgrade over the potential that he has to go to. That's why I say push him.
No, I respect that. One last thing before we head out. And again, I just want to touch on the future of this team one last time, but drop the Tua subject, drop the quarterback position. What's one thing that you're looking forward to this offseason? Is it a personnel change? Is it a free agent? Just what is that big change that you're looking to see or that you want to see?
As crazy as it's going to sound, I just want to keep the band together. Okay. I mean, I want Wilkins back. I want Van Ginkel back. I'm not that concerned about Xavier Howard, quite honestly. I mean, I think it might be time for Xavier to move on. I mean, he's no longer a one-on-one shutdown guy. He got ate up a lot. I want to keep a guy like Nick Needham, right? I want to bring him back. Connor Williams. I think the offensive line got dramatically worse when Connor Williams went down and we had to start counting on Liam Eichenberg to be the center. Connor Williams is still young. So for me, the cap situation is kind of wow, right? I mean, we're not in a great situation cap wise. You can fix that. I mean, the cap it's all math and they can extend stuff and move it around. But right now the Dolphins are way over the cap. They don't have room to go really add a lot of people. And it only gets worse next year. Teron Armstead may not be, he kind of leaned toward sounding like almost retirement. Not that we had him all year. I think he probably played half the games, but still his presence brings that. So for me, it's getting guys like Nick Needham back. It's Van Ginkel. It's, Deshaun Elliott, I think did really well this year and getting healthy. That's what I am really looking forward to. That's all I can really see because I think we are position wise, we're set. So what about you? What's your off season on this?
Well, you kind of stole my thunder. I said I was going to say I wanted a new trainer just for the health issues because there's just so many injuries. But I have two, right? Number one, I do want better trainers. I just don't want these guys to get injured. Obviously, I'm not putting the blame on the trainers. It's kind of a joke, but I do want better health. But the main thing is I want a quarterback change. I'm not saying Tua has to go, but there has to be a quarterback change. Like you said, there has to be some competition that pushes Tua, or we need him out. Because, again, I don't want to waste another year of Dolphins football. We've already had plenty of years to waste. Because if you're going to waste a year, might as well be bad and get a good draft pick. So, yeah.
So let me throw one other thing in, and it's something I've thought about a little bit. When I saw head coaching candidates and things like that, I saw that Frank Smith has a couple of interviews, the Dolphins offensive coordinator, the de facto offensive coordinator. I wouldn't be against Mike McDaniel adding a legitimate offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Because I think Mike McDaniel is a great play caller. I think he's very inventive, right? And it can come up with different things. But I could also see him being a lot stronger in a room where some of his stuff gets thrown out.
Yeah.
We've all met those people, right? Where you just throw a million things against the wall and like 80% of them are genius, but 20% are complete crap.
Exactly. And to McDaniel's credit, he is very creative, but I've really never seen, even the bad coaches in the NFL are better third down play callers than him.
I don't that wide receiver screen stuff in the Kansas City, and you didn't even have blockers out there.
Yeah,
so you literally just threw it to Tyreek against 3 dudes.
But you know what? It's not just that one scenario in a playoff game. It's all season. The third down play calling is bad. You could make an argument. I have to look at the stats that Adam Gase, as bad as he is, he's a defensive guy, right? So you might have better third down play calls with Adam Gase at the helm. So it just comes down to this. McDaniel needs to stay. He needs more help.
He needs a filter.
With Tua, he can't possibly get more help. He definitely needs more help because obviously this year wasn't enough, but you can't get more help.
He needs a filter. He needs a filter on that offense because, again, if you go back and look, how can you possibly – it was against Buffalo in the first half, rush for over 120 yards at 5.7 yards a carry, and you run the ball 3 times in the second half.
Yeah.
Somebody has to be, if McDaniel can't stay that in tune with the game, somebody has to be like, yo, Mike, let's go back to here, right? And I think he desperately needs that. It'll allow him to be